Last Sunday, Kristof wrote a column about Dylan Farrow, the adopted daughter of Woody Allen and missing in action Farrow. Mr. Allen has written the following response to the column and Dylan's account. 21 years ago, when I first heard missing in action Farrow had accused me of child molestation, I found the idea so ludicrous I didn't give it a second thought. We were involved in a terribly acrimonious breakup, with great enmity between us and custody battle slowly gathering energy. The self-serving transparency of her malevolence seemed so obvious I didn't even hire a lawyer to defend myself. It was my show business attorney who told me she was bringing the accusation to the police and I would need a criminal lawyer. I naively thought the accusation would be dismissed out of hand because of course, I hadn't molested Dylan and any rational person would see the ploy for what it was. Common sense would prevail. After all, I was a 56-year-old man who had never before or after been accused of child molestation. I had been going out with missing in action for 12 years and never in that time did she ever suggest to me anything resembling misconduct. Now, suddenly, when I had driven up to her house in Connecticut one afternoon to visit the kids for a few hours, when I would be on my raging adversary's home turf, with half a dozen people present, when I was in the blissful early stages of a happy new relationship with the woman I'd go on to marry, that I would pick this moment in time to embark on a career as a child molester should seem to the most skeptical mind highly unlikely. The sheer logic of such a crazy scenario seemed to me dispositive. Notwithstanding, missing in action insisted that I had abused Dylan and took her immediately to a doctor to be examined. Dylan told the doctor she had not been molested. Missing in action then took Dylan out for ice cream, and when she came back with her the child had changed her story. The police began their investigation. A possible indictment hung in the balance. I very willingly took a lie detector test and of course passed because I had nothing to hide. I asked missing in action to take one and she wouldn't. Last week a woman named Stacy Nelkin, whom I had dated many years ago, came forward to the press to tell them that when missing in action and I first had our custody battle 21 years ago, missing in action had wanted her to testify that she had been underage when I was dating her, despite the fact this wasn't true. Stacy refused. I include this anecdote so we all know what kind of character we are dealing with here. One can imagine in learning this why she wouldn't take a lie detector test. Meanwhile the Connecticut police turned for help to a special investigative unit they relied on in such cases, the Child Sexual Abuse Clinic of a Yale New Haven hospital. This group of impartial, experienced men and women whom the district attorney looked to for guidance as to whether to prosecute, spent months doing a meticulous investigation, interviewing everyone concerned, and checking every piece of evidence. Finally they wrote their conclusion which I quote here. It is our expert opinion that Dylan was not sexually abused by Mr. Allen. Further, we believe that Dylan's statements on videotape and her statements to us during our evaluation do not refer to actual events that occurred to her on August 4, 1992. In developing our opinion we considered three hypotheses to explain Dylan's statements. First, that Dylan's statements were true and that Mr. Allen had sexually abused her. Second, that Dylan's statements were not true but were made up by an emotionally vulnerable child who was caught up in the disturbed family and who was responding to the stresses in the family. And third, that Dylan was coached or influenced by her mother, Ms. Farrow. While we can conclude that Dylan was not sexually abused, we cannot be definite about whether the second formulation by itself or the third formulation by itself is true. We believe that it is more likely that a combination of these two formulations best explains Dylan's allegations of sexual abuse. Could it be any clearer? Mr. Allen did not abuse Dylan. Most likely a vulnerable, stressed-out 7-year-old was coached by missing in action Farrow. This conclusion disappointed a number of people. The district attorney was champing at the bit to prosecute a celebrity case, and Justice Elliot Wilk, the custody judge, wrote a very irresponsible opinion saying when it came to the molestation, we will probably never know what occurred. But we did know because it had been determined and there was no equivocation about the fact that no abuse had taken place. Justice Wilk was quite rough on me and never approved of my relationship with Soon Yi, missing in action's adopted daughter, who was in her early 20s. He thought of me as an older man exploiting a much younger woman, which outraged missing in action as improper despite the fact she had dated a much older Frank Sinatra when she was 19. In fairness to Justice Wilk, The public felt the same dismay over Soon Yu and myself, but despite what it looked like, our feelings were authentic, and we've been happily married for 16 years with 2 great kids, both adopted. Incidentally, coming on the heels of the media circus and false accusations, Soon Yu and I were extra carefully scrutinized by both the adoption agency and adoption courts, and everyone blessed our adoptions. Missing in Action took custody of the children and we went our separate ways. I was heartbroken. Moses was angry with me. Ronan I didn't know well because Missing in Action would never let me get close to him from the moment he was born, and Dylan, whom I adored and was very close to, and about whom Missing in Action called my sister in a rage and said, "He took my daughter, now I'll take his." I never saw her again, nor was I able to speak with her no matter how hard I tried. I still loved her deeply, and felt guilty that by falling in love with Soon Yu I had put her in the position of being used as a pawn for revenge. Soon Yu and I made countless attempts to see Dylan, but Missing in Action blocked them all, spitefully knowing how much we both loved her but totally indifferent to the pain and damage she was causing the little girl merely to appease her own vindictiveness. Here I quote Moses Farrow, 14 at the time. "My mother drugged it into me to hate my father for tearing apart the family and sexually molesting my sister." Moses is now 36 years old and a family therapist by profession. "Of course Woody did not molest my sister," he said. "She loved him and looked forward to seeing him when he would visit. She never hid from him until our mother succeeded in creating the atmosphere of fear and hate towards him." Dylan was 7, Ronan 4, and this was, according to Moses, the steady narrative year after year. Now it's 21 years later and Dylan has come forward with the accusations that Yale experts investigated and found false. Plus a few little added creative flourishes that seem to have magically appeared during our 21-year estrangement. Not that I doubt Dylan hasn't come to believe she'd been molested, but if from the age of 7 a vulnerable child is taught by a strong mother to hate her father because he is a monster who abused her, is it so inconceivable that after many years of this indoctrination the image of me Missing in Action wanted to establish had taken root? Is it any wonder the experts at Yale had picked up the maternal coaching aspect 21 years ago? Even the venue where the fabricated molestation was supposed to have taken place was poorly chosen but interesting. Missing in Action chose the attic of her country house, a place she should have realized I'd never go to because it is a tiny, cramped, enclosed spot where one can hardly stand up, and I'm a major claustrophobe. The 1 or 2 times she asked me to come in there to look at something, I did, but quickly had to run out. Undoubtedly the attic idea came to her from the Dory Previn song, "With My Daddy in the Attic." It was on the same record as the song Dory Previn had written about Missing in Action's betraying their friendship by insidiously stealing her husband. Andrew, beware of young girls. One must ask, did Dylan even write the letter, or was it at least guided by her mother? Does the letter really benefit Dylan, or does it simply advance her mother's shabby agenda? That is to hurt me with a smear. There is even a lame attempt to do professional damage by trying to involve movie stars, which smells a lot more like Missing in Action than Dylan. After all, if speaking out was really a necessity for Dylan, she had already spoken out months earlier in Vanity Fair. Here I quote Moses Farrow again, "Knowing that my mother often used us as pawns, I cannot trust anything that is said or written from anyone in the family." Finally, does Missing in Action herself really even believe molested her daughter? Common sense must ask, would a mother who thought her 7-year-old daughter was sexually abused by a molester, a pretty horrific crime, give consent for a film clip of her to be used to honor the molester at the Golden Globes? Of course, I did not molest Dylan. I loved her and hope one day she will grasp how she has been cheated out of having a loving father and exploited by a mother more interested in her own festering anger than her daughter's well-being. Being taught to hate your father and made to believe he molested you has already taken a psychological toll on this lovely young woman, and soon you and I are both hoping that one day she will understand who has really made her a victim and reconnect with us, as Moses has, in a loving, productive way. No one wants to discourage abuse victims from speaking out, but one must bear in mind that sometimes there are people who are falsely accused, and that is also a terribly destructive thing. This piece will be my final word on this entire matter, and no one will be responding on my behalf to any further comments on it by any party. Enough people have been hurt,